Hey guys, Ike here from Mike'sOutdoors.com. Today I'm going to tackle a subject that I'm fairly new at, but something I've really wanted to do a video on, just for the simple fact of when I started this process about back tension and shooting a hinge release. I couldn't find any good information on this thing out there, and I was able to go to Archery Talk and find a few videos and get some good advice from the guys on there. But as far as just a good how-to video and a good video on the entire process, I really couldn't find one. So I don't know how long this video is going to take, but I'm going to try to cover it all in one video. And there's going to be a bunch of guys say that this is the wrong. I know, because in my process of learning this, there's a lot of people that had good advice, bad advice, do it like this, do it like this, and this is the way I do it, and it works pretty well. If you've watched the Project Ike series from start to finish, by the time I got to the end of it, I'm shooting this release now with a lot of confidence and really doing it right. So that's the biggest thing that I learned, even from, I watched a video from Griv, I watched a video, the Scott video from, I can't remember the guy's name who makes them now, but anyway, I watched the Scott video where Levi and some of these guys talked about shooting back tension and shooting hinge style releases, and really it's, as long as you're accomplishing the right thing, there's no real set, this is how you do it every time. There are some things, you do not do this, but there are several different ways of getting this back tension style, this hinge style release to function properly, and some people do it differently. This is the way I do it and some of the things I've learned along the way. So first things first, I'm going to talk about our setup here. I've got an old release. I got my Bear Moto 7 you guys have seen. It's got a removable grip, so I took the grip off of it, and because I like the shooting off of the actual riser itself and shooting with side plates. So I made myself a little practice deal here, and we're going to talk about the release pretty quickly, but this is my practice deal. You're going to spend a lot of time with this thing and learning how to use this release. So we're going to be using it today just to show you some things here, rather than getting out and shooting, because that's going to make it hard for me to be shooting and showing you the proper things. So I'm going to get real close to the camera here and show you. I'm shooting a Carter Colby 2, and this is a hinge style back tension release. A lot of people are going to say that hinges aren't back tension, and that what I'm doing is not back tension, and blah blah blah, but that's their opinion and you're entitled to it. So, and I don't think what I'm doing is actual back tension, but it works really well for me. So you'll see here, first off, I love Carter releases. This is what I had before. My other one is a Carter Quickie 1, and this is a Carter Colby 2, and the customer service at Carter is awesome. I was at the ATA show a couple years ago, and my Carter Quickie 1 actually broke on me, and I had no release. So I went to their booth at the ATA show, and the owner of the company, which I can't remember his name right now, stopped what he was doing, talking to some potential customers, and came over and rebuilt my release for me. Everything, put everything new in the thing, and I mean completely stopped what he was doing, said excuse me, and came over and completely rebuilt my release for me. And I asked him what I owed him. He didn't charge me a thing for it, and I was just, man, ever since then, I'm loyal to Carter. So let's see if we can get this up here and get it to focus on it instead of on me. But what we've got in here is you've got a half moon right here, and then you've got your trigger. You've got your, and you can see the actual hook here has got a little indentation in there, and then of course you got your hinge. So when it comes down, that indentation, that hook, sits right on that half moon. And when you're operating this thing, what you're doing is you're basically causing that hinge to rotate, and it's causing that half moon, or causing that hook to slip off of that half moon. Just like that. So your half moon, and how to set this thing up here, I'll do it again for you. You adjust this thing to sensitivity and how hot it is, basically how easy it is to set off, by adjusting this half moon in here. It's got, this one has, a lot of these are going to be different, but This one has a set screw in here, and you just take your Allen wrench, put it up in there, and it'll free that half moon up, and then you can rotate it around. So if you take your half moon in there and you rotate it up, it's going to bite onto this hook better, and it's going to be harder to set off. It's going to be, so if you can set this thing up to where it's impossible to set off. If you rotate this thing down, it's going to be a little more sensitive, a little hotter, and it's going to be a little easier to set off. So that's how you adjust your half moon for as far as sensitivity. And we're going to talk about how to get this release set up and ready to shoot in a little bit. But this one also has a clicker on it. On this side right here, there's an indentation that as this thing comes forward, it'll hit it and it'll actually go click. And on this side over here, it's smooth and does not have that clicker. So I started out with the clicker and got away from it, just for the simple fact of when I heard the click, I knew it was time to shoot, and I was getting to where I was going. It was going to click, and I was ready for it, you know. So the clicker's good for some people, not good for some people. So when you hear people talk about having a back tension release with a clicker on there, that's what we're talking about. When you get it at full draw, as you start to pull through, it'll go click, and then it'll after a second or whatever, if you're doing it right, then it'll go off. So that's a clicker on there. So how I got this thing set up and ready to shoot, I got a lot of advice from different people on how to set this thing up and blah blah blah, and how to set it up to where it would really work for me. And there's a guy on Archery Talk Pageant who gave me the best advice, and I took his advice and modified it just a little bit because of what I was trying to accomplish was just a little bit different than what he was trying to accomplish. But his advice was the best advice as far as setting this thing up that I got. So the first thing you do is take your half moon and rotate it up all the way to where you can't set this thing off. And you're going to use this thing right here. Or you can use a bow if you want to. But set this thing to where when you pull it back, you're pulling, and you cannot set this thing off. So, and that, well, I got mine set. But anyway, so you rotate that half moon up to where as soon as you cannot pull the thing off. So, and then what we're going to do from there is we're going to adjust it down to a different sensitivity. This post, we're going to talk about it a little bit later. You have to have your thumb wrapped around this post, and you'll see here, you can watch the release in this segment. When I'm pulling against it, I got my thumb wrapped around that post. I cannot set this thing off. So now I take my thumb off that release, off that post, and allows it to go off. So that's one of the keys that a lot of people, you hear them punching themselves in the face and things like that. It's because they're allowing this hinge release to rotate. So with thumb around the post, I can pull as hard as I want to and it won't go off. Thumb right here, and it goes off that quick, that easy. So your first step in setting this thing up is to set it up where it will not go off at all. Your second step is to set this thing up, is to set it up to where you can pull this thing back and let go of the post, and it goes off. And I did that on purpose, but my release is not set up that way. But once you get it set to where it's that sensitive, to where as soon as you let this thing off, as soon as you let your thumb off, it goes off. Then what you do is loosen it up and start clicking it back up to where it's not as sensitive, and get it to where you want it from that point. He had some different steps, but so you can get it to where you found that middle ground to where it's not so sensitive it'll go off as soon as you let off the deal, and it's not so hard to shoot that you can actually do it. So I started, once I got it to where when I let it go it went off, I went up about 3 clicks and then up, and this has clicks in it, so clicks up to make it more hard to get it to set off. And what I eventually ended up adding was about 7 clicks to it, but that got me my baseline. I can't get it to go off, now it's going off too easy. Added a few clicks to it, and then I started getting to where I could pull it back and go through my process and get it set off. And then I could add the clicks to it and put it in that up position to where I actually wanted it to set. And for me, I want my process, I want to be able to put my pin on the target and hold it and float it. So for me, this is about the process that I'll go through. I get it on there, let go of my post, start pulling through. About 2 to 3 seconds after I let go of the post, I'm released. My arrow's gone. So that's how I set my release up. It's going to be different for you because you're maybe trying to accomplish something different than I am, and you may be pulling through a little bit differently than I am. So this is just a guideline of how to do this and how to get this thing set up. It's going to be different for you than it is for me, and a lot of you guys are going to say that I'm doing this wrong, but this is the way I like it, and it's working real good. So now you got your release set up. So we'll talk about how you can shoot this, how to actually shoot this thing the way I shoot it. It may not be the proper way, but the way I shoot it, I think it's the proper way. So you got your release set up, and you got it to where it's going to go off. You can have 3 fingers, 4 fingers, whatever. But when you actually go to pull this thing back, you hook up your hinge and get it in there good and solid. And if it's got a post on it, or if it's got some kind of safety on it, you'll wrap your finger around the post, or you'll engage the safety. You'll pull this thing back, and you'll get to your proper anchoring position. And you notice I've got a good T shape. My elbow's not up too high. I've got a good shape to me, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to let go of the post or click off your safety. And what I'm basically going to do is continue to pull through the shot. I'm going to push with my bow arm, and I'm just going to continue to pull like I'm pulling against the back wall of that bow. Like I just want to continue to pull, like I haven't hit my anchoring position, and I want to continue to get to my anchoring position. So I'm on the back. I got it to set up. I'm on the back wall of the shot of the bow. I'm up against the back wall as hard as I can pull it. I got my thumb against there, and I'm just going to push the bow toward the target, and I'm going to pull back through the release just like I would if I wanted to continue pulling through that back wall. And that's what you're doing. You're just pulling through the back wall. And you can see I release my thumb, and it pulls through. And the weird thing you'll feel is that what I'm doing here is my hand is actually pulling off of my release. So if I can do this without setting it off, I'm going to get right up next to the camera and show you my hand position. And that's what my hand's doing. I did that really exaggerated. I wasn't pulling it very hard, but that's what I'm doing really, is basically pulling through, and my hand is sliding off of the release. So this hinge release has to rotate a little bit. Some people, when I first started shooting back tension, said, you know, you don't want your hinge to rotate. You don't want it to rotate, but it has to rotate to get it to set off. Because if it doesn't rotate, your hinge is not going to rotate. So to shoot a hinge style release, your release has to rotate a little bit. It's just getting it set to the right position and doing it properly. That's going to be the big thing. And so like I said, that's how I do it. Is I just pull back, and my hand starts sliding off, and it allows it to rotate, and it allows it to fire. Now what I did when I first started, and it was because I didn't know how to shoot this thing, was I would keep my finger wrapped around this post, and I was actually rotating my whole hand. So that's definitely the wrong thing to do. You know, we talked about the right things and wrong things, and that's one of the biggest wrong things that you can do. I have left it just like this, and when I was firing, I was just rotating my whole wrist and shooting it like that, and that really is not, of course, is not the right way to do it. It's just pretty much like punching the trigger on a trigger style release. So that's pretty much how I'm shooting it. I'm just pushing with my bow arm, and I'm continuing to pull through with my release hand, and it's actually rotating this thing, and it's allowing it to fire. Now I know another guy, and I tried this and just didn't like it. I know a few other guys who are doing this, and when they get their bow back, what they're doing is slowly letting up pressure on their index finger. So we've got it back all the way, and you can see the hinge is wanting to rotate. What I did there was I didn't slide my hand, I just let up pressure on my index finger and allowed it to rotate. And that's one way of doing it, you know, but it's just one way that I didn't like. So you can see that it just allows it to rotate, because it was a little bit too quick for me. I could let up pressure on my, when I got into a bind, I could let up pressure on my index finger, and I could let it rotate. So that's the basics of how to set this thing up and the basics of how to use this thing. So the next thing we're going to talk about in another video is how to use back tension with a few other style releases. So we'll talk about that in the next few videos, but I hope this helped you guys out. I hope it wasn't too confusing, and if you guys who are doing it different than me, you know, try to be constructive. Try not to just go in here and say, you know, if you say anything too bad, I'm just going to ban you from the video. But constructive criticism is welcome, but let's not get too carried away, because I think the key to this is everybody's going to do it a little bit differently. That's the basics of how to shoot one of these, and that's the basics that I've found through the last month of trial and error, and once I got it right, I really just worked on keeping it right, as you can see in the Project Ike videos, and I did really well about getting it down pretty quickly. But I've watched a few videos from Griv, watched a few videos from the ATA show with Levi and some of these other guys, professional archers, and the basics that what I got was, this is how you do it. How you accomplish it is up to you. So that's how I do it. That's how I shoot my hinge style, back tension style release. So I appreciate you guys watching these videos. For more of the Project Ike videos showing me from when I was cheating this thing to when I actually got it right, and product reviews, how-to videos, you can check out our website, ikesoutdoors.com. Appreciate you guys watching.